Hey there. I wanted to show this off. It's one of those hand plaster things. That's the plastered hands of myself and my wife and my three stepkids, her three children. They're aged 9, and I have two 8-year-old twins for stepkids. Wonderful people, love them a lot. We got this plaster kit here, and I didn't know what the heck I was looking at, and I didn't know if it was going to be any good or not. I kind of didn't think it was going to work at all. Because it came in a white bucket full of all this weird powders and stuff that we had to mix, and then we had to sit there all with our hands together and try to hold them still with at the time, 8-year-old and two 7-year-olds for 10 minutes. And I thought, man, this ain't going to work. I didn't think it was going to turn out well, but it actually turned out really well. I don't know if you can see that or not. I like it. Turned out quite a bit better than I expected. One thing that has not turned out better than expected is the Bryce Young being drafted by the Carolina Panthers situation. And that's something that I really didn't have high expectations for to start with either, and that somehow has turned out even worse. But a lot of those expectations came from the fact that the David Tepper owned Carolina Panthers, they're not going to do anything. Whether they drafted Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud, even if Patrick Mahomes somehow wound up in Carolina, we're not going to do anything good. Normally it would be tough knowing that a just wonderful up and coming quarterback like C.J. Stroud, we could have had him, but instead, not only did we take Bryce Young instead, we traded two first round picks and two second round picks and DJ Moore, wide receiver who just did an outstanding job for us for a long time. Gave that all up to pass on CJ Stroud to take Bryce Young. And it was announced yesterday that they are going to bench Bryce Young because he's not been performing in favor of Andy Dalton. Now, I didn't really have much reaction to that. I mean, first of all, I feel bad for Bryce. I don't have anything against Bryce Young at all. He, by all accounts, a good dude, works hard. There's always questions about his size, his arm strength, or lack thereof at the quarterback position, which I've always found kind of unfair to some extent because you can't really control those things. But at the same time, you kind of have to have them. I guess it's like basketball to an extent. You have to have a certain amount of height and length, otherwise you can't play certain positions. You're not going to be a forward or a center in the NBA and be somebody like me who's 6'2", which isn't short, but I could barely be a point guard or shooting guard in the NBA if I had athletic ability, which I don't. So yeah, this was announced, and I didn't really have a reaction to it. Even though the Panthers are my team and I've been making videos about them, I mean, it's like, okay, we're going to lose with Bryce Young, or we're going to lose with Andy Dalton, or if Baker Mayfield lost his mind and decided to come back to Carolina and leave this amazing situation he's in Tampa Bay, we'd lose with him like we did a couple years ago. Because that's just how poorly run this team is. I mean, look at what Baker's doing now. He came to us after Cleveland decided he was washed and got Deshaun Watson in what is a really bad trade, and we'll get to that in a second, because that's part of the overall theme of this video that I kind of put together in my head. For those of you who can't tell, when I make these videos, I don't really have an outline or any kind of visual. It's just me talking off the top of my head. For better or worse. Usually for worse. I'm not going to deny that, but it's like, I just knew we weren't going to do good anyway, and I'm kind of glad that C.J. Stroud, as much as I would love to have him on my Panthers, I knew they weren't going to go anywhere with him. They might not be on 0-17 watch, but we made this decision to bench Bryce Young for Andy Dalton, and we're a team that's on 0-17 watch in week 2 of a 17-week season. Or 18 weeks with a bye week, so 17-game season. We're already unironically on 0-17 watch. I mean, we'll probably win a game or two. Denver's a game I'm looking at. The New York Giants, if they come out somehow even flatter or worse than they normally are, and we can actually have a decent game, we might can win those. But we're not going anywhere. And there's been a lot of talk ever since they announced they're going to bench Bryce Young. Was this the worst trade ever? Giving up, a 2023 and a 2024 first and second round pick to move up in the draft so we could draft Bryce Young instead of C.J. Stroud. Was that and DJ Moore, was that the worst trade ever, or was Cleveland's trade and horrendous contract they gave to Deshaun Watson, who I've talked about with his off the field stuff, which is far more reaching and important in the grand scheme of things than anything on the field? They're saying, which is the worst trade ever, and to me it's Cleveland. And the reason I say that, I'm not trying to be a homer or anything. I mean, look, we're bad. We are definitely the worst franchise right now in the league. We have the worst owner. We have the worst just overall structure, and we're not going to go anywhere for a long, long time. So there's really no what ifs with the Bryce Young situation. Had we, not drafted Bryce Young, had we drafted C.J. Stroud, had we hung on to Baker Mayfield, who, by the way, is an MVP watch. I know it's week 2, but he is shown that he's just fine. And ironically, Cleveland let him go. They decided he was washed, and that's why they pursued the Deshaun Watson trade, which ironically is now why it has opened up a lot for Houston to get C.J. Stroud and allow him to flourish and show what he can do. And he's only going to get better. But for me as a Panthers fan, there's just no what if hanging over my head, because Cleveland, to me, they're a good quarterback away from really contending. They've already made the playoffs with Joe Flacco. I forgot it was last year or the year before that, kind of starting to run together. And to me, they don't have a bad team. They're not the best run franchise, but they're competent. They're competent enough, and I think with the right quarterback, they can make some noise. It's hard to make noise right now in the AFC, or really anywhere in the NFL, with what Patrick Mahomes is doing in Kansas City. That is a model franchise, model coach. He has made Andy Reid and that staff there has just made so many great decisions for a great quarterback in Patrick Mahomes and allowed him to reach his potential. It's been fun to watch. I have a lot of respect for Patrick. They got rid of Tyreek Hill and won 2 straight Super Bowls. They won a Super Bowl with him, lost that one in Tampa Bay in the COVID year with Tyreek, got rid of him after losing a AFC title game to the Cincinnati Bengals, who had their number there for a while, won 2 in a row. But that's what a good organization does. So for me, there's no what if hanging over my head. Dang, if we had drafted this person or not made this trade, we'd be in a lot better shape. We wouldn't. I mean, it might not be an 0-17 watch, but, we're still looking at, a top 5 pick in the draft, which we'll probably do something stupid with, because we have history of that with David Tepper. That got me to thinking, after, a few hours of just not really thinking about it, and I got to think, is there any other precedents for this where a horrible, horrible team in a horrible, horrible situation makes a horrible, horrible trade and somehow winds up in an even more horrible situation like we've done? I can really think of one off the top of my head. I'm sure there's plenty. I'm sure if you want to go in the comments and tell me, I'm sure there's plenty where, a bad team that was going to go nowhere, no matter who they had in the NFL, made a horrendous trade. But in the grand scheme of things, it didn't matter. So that's why I say, if I'm a Cleveland Browns fan, I'm probably a lot more sick about the Deshaun trade. And that's before you even take into what he's done off the field, or allegedly done off the field. I'm a lot more sick if I'm a Cleveland Browns fan than I am as a Carolina Panthers fan under this David Tepper ownership, because I know we're not going anywhere. So I got to thinking, I couldn't think of anything that really parallels it. And I got to thinking, is there any kind of Bizarro situation where just a big, big what if could hang over your head in the NFL or any other league? Had we not done this, just incredible domino effect of good things that would have happened instead of bad things. And it didn't take me long to remember, hey, my Charlotte Hornets in the 1996 draft with the 13th pick drafted Kobe Bryant. And we promptly traded him to the Lakers for Vlade Divac. We needed some help in the center. And in all fairness for Vlade, he did a good job for us. Obviously, he's not Kobe Bryant, in my opinion, when it comes to guard play, at least. I know Vlade was a center, but only Michael Jordan was better than Kobe. I think Michael Jordan's the greatest that's ever played the game. And that's not just my Tar Heel Homer heart saying that. I think he's the greatest ever. But Kobe's right. Kobe's second among guards, in my opinion. And he's actually closer to Michael than I think a lot of people realize. I know his era was a lot more slow it down. There wasn't, there was a lot of defense being played. He had to play in the Western Conference against Kevin Garnett and Tim Duncan and a guy from Denver. I can't remember his name. Dikembe Mutombo in his earlier years when he was still good. Yao Ming, he's 7'5". He could defend very well. Amari Stoudemire, I think, was a good defender. Maybe I'm thinking of somebody else on that Phoenix Suns team with Steve Nash. But I got to thinking, what if we would have kept him? Now at the time he was an 18, or he's still 17 actually. He hadn't quite turned 18 yet, coming out of high school. So there's a lot of work to be done. But those original Charlotte Hornets, the team that was an expansion team in '88 in the NBA, who would eventually move to New Orleans and be the New Orleans Hornets for a while. Now they're the New Orleans Pelicans. We were okay in the '90s. We actually had a pretty respectable team. We'd make the playoffs. We lost to Michael Jordan, the Bulls, a couple times. One time when he just came back from his baseball sabbatical, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, he wasn't even close to being Michael Jordan." Well, he's still really good. He beat us in 5 games and as the lower seed before taking the number 1 seed Shaq and Penny Magic to 6 games in the semifinals, who would make the finals and get swept by Hakeem. Very underrated, but that's a basketball video I could do probably for another day. But I just got to thinking, what if we would have kept Kobe? Kobe went to the Lakers, the storied Lakers, got to play with Shaq, which is both a blessing and a curse because he joined a team that already had 2 all-star guards, Eddie Johnson and Nick Van Exel, if I'm not mistaken, or Eddie Jones, or they're all-stars, and didn't get a lot of playing time. Had he gone to Charlotte, we were in the process of having a lot of respectable teams. We had Larry Johnson, Alonzo Mourning, Muggsy Bogues was very good at what he did. I know people remember him from being 5'3" and looking hilarious out there among the redwoods, but he was good. And the Hornets made the playoffs in '98 and went against Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls in the second round, and we actually won a game in Chicago. And B.J. Armstrong, who was on the team, who was on the Chicago Bulls' first three-peat, had a big game, talked trash, and Michael Jordan promptly took it personal, shut him down. But I can't help but think, what if we had Kobe on those teams? Because there was really a spiral that happened after that. Alonzo left, or I think he might have already left for the Heat by that point. Larry Johnson, I think, had already left for the Knicks. But we were putting together some good teams and some good lineups. And it really kind of fell apart after that, to the point where I believe after the 2002 season or 2003, Charlotte was no longer profitable. The Charlotte Hornets were no longer profitable, and they left to go to New Orleans. And a couple years later, we got an expansion team, the Charlotte Bobcats, who turned back into the Charlotte Hornets after New Orleans let go of the Hornets team name to become the Pelicans. But I can't help but think, would that have ever happened if we had kept Kobe? Because with Kobe, he would have gotten a lot more early reps on that Charlotte team. Even though we were a playoff team, we didn't have Shaq, so we didn't have championship aspirations. So we had every reason in the world to make sure that one of our top priorities would be to develop Kobe. Now, there's a lot of what-ifs there. Would Kobe have stuck around for Charlotte, especially if they'd have continued making bad moves and all that? But there's also the thought that Kobe really wanted to have his own team. As much as he enjoyed his success with Shaq, he also didn't enjoy it because it wasn't his team. He didn't feel like it was Shaq's team. Shaq, to him, didn't put the effort in that needed to be put in. They feuded. The Lakers made what turned out to be a really good decision. And despite the fact that Kobe was looked at as kind of like the villain of the NBA at the time, they sent Shaq packing. It was a horrendous trade for the Lakers that set Kobe back a couple years with the personnel they had, but he eventually won back-to-back titles in 2009 and 2010 with his team, and he really cemented himself. So part of me wonders, would he have embraced trying to be that guy to bring the Charlotte Hornets to be that team? And especially with Tim Duncan, would he have looked at Tim Duncan over in the West with what he's doing with the small market Spurs and turning them into a juggernaut? Would he say, I need to be doing that and I need to be doing that better? With his Jordan-esque similarities, there's a good chance maybe yes. Now, obviously, the team would have to do right and make some good decisions, but what if What if the original Charlotte Hornets front office made all the right decisions? Maybe not even all the right decisions, but made enough right decisions, put the help that Kobe needed around him, allowed him to flourish and develop a lot quicker, and he would have been the guy. What would Charlotte be? Would we still have our original Charlotte Hornets and not this whatever you call the Bobcat / Hornets reboot? 3 playoff appearances in 20 years, 3 first-round exits, 2 sweeps. Just bad. It's pathetic. But could we have kept that original team, and could the Charlotte Hornets have had a very respectable run of championships and lots of deep playoff runs and being one of those teams? Would it have shifted some of the power to the East? You got to remember when Kobe was winning those championships and during this time period when he would have been on the Hornets, all the power went to the West after Michael Jordan retired from the Bulls. All the juggernauts, the Lakers, ironically with Kobe and Shaq, the Tim Duncan and David Robinson Spurs turned into the Tim Duncan and Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili Spurs. The Steve Nash and Amari Stoudemire Suns, even though they never made it to the finals and won a championship, they were definitely a team to be reckoned with, as were the Houston Rockets with Yao Ming, Tracy McGrady, and they had some good pieces. They had some really good pieces. And, the Dallas Mavericks with Dirk, they finally got theirs. They had a lot of playoff disappointments, but they finally, had a big playoff upset and won it that I think we all loved, or at least those of us that don't worship at the altar of LeBron James loved. And so basically, and to tie this back to Bryce Young, you're probably wondering, was this supposed to be a Bryce Young video? Yeah, it was. With Kobe, there's always that what if that hangs over your head. All these years later, almost 30 years after that draft night, about a year and a half away from the 30-year anniversary of that, what could have happened? What could have been? How would the Charlotte Hornets brand be looked at? How would we be looked at had we done that? Because the Charlotte Hornets in the 90s were respectable. They were just seemed like a piece or two away, and one of those pieces was Michael Jordan retiring. Nobody was going to beat him from 91 onwards when he played a full season, was in basketball shape. And he, once he retired, could we have taken some of that momentum that we built in the 90s with Alonzo and Larry Johnson and done something with that? And with Kobe, yeah, I think there's the possibility they could have, but it's just more of the apathy I feel towards Bryce Young being benched, not towards Bryce himself, but just towards the overall situation and what we went through to get him instead of C.J. Stroud. It just sounds like it doesn't matter. There's no what if. If we had C.J. Stroud, if we had Patrick Mahomes, if we had Joe Montana in his prime, my personal favorite. I don't think. Well, in fact, I know we would be looking at probably 6 wins instead of maybe 0 or 1 or 2. So, at the end of that, it doesn't really matter. So, it's more of an indictment on David Tepper and the Panthers. And we got to get. God, I wish David would sell the team. I mean, with what the NFL is going through now, they's got to be worth more than he paid for it. Make the profit and, man, find another team. See if, there's any potentially profitable team that, I mean, most of the owners are old, so is there any of them whose kids don't really want to run an NFL franchise? That'd be great, because the Carolinas do not like him. They've not embraced him, and we're going to need a hard reset, and we don't really have any pieces either to make that big splash trade like the Cowboys, in '89. We don't have a Herschel Walker to kickstart, 4-year swing from the absolute worst run franchise in the league to the best, and then back to the worst after Jerry Jones ran Jimmy Johnson off. But that's another story for another day. So, hate it for Bryce. He never really had a chance. I don't know if anybody's going to give him a chance now, but David Tepper, please sell the team. Thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking through this kind of me trying to piece together 2 very different things. And thank you guys for your views. And if you want to subscribe, go right ahead. I'm not going to complain about it. So thank you guys, and I'll talk to you soon.